And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 48th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where our show has one main goal: to view our perspective of IU sports from the point of view as a student or young adult. In addition, we will also give our view on hot takes from around the world of sports. This evening, host Noah Freeman. I am back in action. I apologize for being out the past couple of weeks, but I'm with my usual co-host Matthew Lukens, who has been holding down the fort for the past two episodes. Thanks, Matt, for doing all that. But normally, we'll be going live every Tuesday evening at 8:30 p.m. But if you miss us live, you can subscribe to various networks so you can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and subscribe. All of the information is in our website, thehoosiersound.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. But first, we have to do our weekly. Matt, what is your memorable monologue for this week in IU sports in particular?
All right. So my memorable monologue this week has to be about IU basketball, and more specifically about how happy I am to see everybody from IU basketball being able to go home and actually enjoy the summer. So if you haven't been following the players, a lot of the players are from out of state. So like the Clifton Moores and the rest of the players have all gone back to like their hometowns and be able to like hang out with their friends from home. So I think that's really good for them and like a really good experience because they've been at school all summer working their butts off, and they definitely deserve some time off. And I mean, as a person who's fully enjoyed his summer break and is now ready to go back to school, and I'm heading back on Thursday, I can totally understand why a week of hanging out and not doing anything and maybe getting some drills in and maybe hitting the weight room a little bit so that Archie doesn't yell at you, but like still doing like a lot less than you've been doing at school would be really beneficial.
Yeah, we don't have to bring up this guy too much, but you can even Tom Crean started to figure that out late into his IU career, where he was giving the players more time off and just more time to go home and specific time to do all of that. And he found that it was actually working a lot better because everyone could just decompress, go see family, like you said, just hang out and just get away for a second. And then they come back much more refreshed, and they're not just pounding hard every day to where you're kind of just doing useless reps and useless days of practice. So yeah, I agree.
Well, on the Tom Crean note, I like completely opposite of my monologue, but today I didn't realize that he actually uses Twitter now.
Yeah, he does.
his Twitter account is the best. So if you don't follow it, go follow Tom Crean's Twitter account. It's great.
It is. And he also gives a lot of shout outs to IU players in general. So it's funny. He's really great on that Twitter. And he's still really nice to IU players, and even though he is now at a different team. But for this week's episode, we are going to cover a couple things. So we're going to continue our mini series where we're going through each class. So we first started out with the outgoing senior class and basically how to replace a lot of those guys. Then we fell into the incoming senior class, went to the junior class, and now we're going to talk about the sophomores. But now that we are getting into college football, where you have sidelines that could hold upwards of 100 or more players on each team, and now this year, which we'll talk about, they actually added each training camp could have 5 extra players. So we're starting to add so many players that we're not going to be able to, we shouldn't, and it would be a little weird to talk about every single player. So when we get to our sophomore segment, for at least football, we're basically just going to touch on the people that have a shot at playing time. And then obviously basketball, we'll talk about everyone, but there's most of the sophomores, all but maybe one and a half kind of people will play. But then we're going to first start with the IU football media day. So a couple episodes ago, Matt talked about the Big Ten Media Day, which had some drama that could have been there. And thankfully, Matt didn't go into it as a good thing of one of the big issues, the hot button topic that we've been talking about for a while. Just since that's gotten, I feel like, even worse since Matt's gone in there. But IU specifically had their own football media day. What was it? I think it was last Thursday, since training camps and stuff started last Friday. They all just kind of had a big press conference where almost everyone was able to get in front of a camera. Tom Allen got in front of a camera for a while, but I'm just going to talk about just a few of the highlights kind of Media Day because, man, Tom Allen had a 30-minute press conference. Most of the coaches, even some of the like physical trainers had interviews. Every single player had an interview. So really we could go on for probably a couple hours just on talking if we just listed everything everyone did. So first I'm going to start with Tom Allen's talk, and I'm just going to highlight a few of it because he did talk for 30 minutes, and he started out talking about the extra 5 players in training camp and kind of went into with a couple questions, talked about how the 4-game red shirt is working. So he basically just talked about how this is going to be great for the freshmen in particular, how we're adding a bunch more people, and just now the depth can be a lot more solid now that a lot of people are going to be play. And if you didn't listen to Matt's episode, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, he did talk about, and he mentioned where now that they have the new red shirt rule, if you didn't hear about, so football players can now go into they can play 4 games during the year and still redshirt for the entire season. So Tom Allen just talked about how now the freshmen, basically his main comment was now the freshmen got to be ready for any single play. They got to have their helmet on, be ready to step in at any time, because if they step onto the field, it'll count as a game, but they can still redshirt.
I wish basketball had the same thing.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you commented on that, and that would be great, even if it was like 5 games, something like that. That they could still redshirt, and then someone like Race we could have seen last year for a little bit, and then he still could have redshirted. Maybe this will be the beginning to that.
Well, we definitely could have used the forward depth last year. So
oh yeah. But he did a lot of that. He mentioned, if you hadn't heard, it's not too pertinent, but they had some coaching title changes. So the coaching staff didn't change, but if you heard anything about that and you were wondering what this title change meant, he just was saying that Mike Hart, the running backs coach, is also now going to be called the assistant head coach. Mark Hagan, the assistant defensive coordinator, is now also called the co-defensive coordinator, because basically Tom Allen is still the defensive coordinator, but Mark is going to be the guy that's still doing all of that. So they just had some title changes. And then he kind of talked about the linebacker position, just how a bunch of people need to step up. Went on for probably about 5 or 10 minutes with specific people, how they're going to replace a lot of the linebacking stuff that we had. And then obviously the question that probably even defensive coaches got was just the quarterback race, which I'm going to get into later because there were obviously a lot of questions for that. So I'm just going to make that a category of his own. It was pretty long. I think I summed most of it up. You don't necessarily need to see it, but the person that wouldn't be too bad to see was actually Mike DeBoard's 10-minute stuff. And yes, all of us are more or less a little frustrated with his first season, but even as we have been on this podcast, and even as Matt has been on this podcast.
Oh yes, love Mike DeBoard.
But let's give him a chance. We'll kind of start like with a fresh start, kind of a clean slate for now, and just see maybe if that was his first year. Because who knows, maybe it was his first year just trying to get his system in. And I'm going to mention something before that could have also affected maybe a lot of what he was doing. But about the first 5 or 6 minutes of his 10-minute talk was talking about the quarterbacks, which I'll get into again. But the very first thing he actually talked about was the offensive linemen and how important they were. He basically, he talked about how in his first to second year at Tennessee, he had a similar situation where he brought back almost the entire offensive line. I don't remember if it was 4 out of the 5 or all 5 like IU's doing, and how they made a massive improvement just from year 1 to year 2. And that's what he's looking for with these guys this year. This was Media Day was right before training camp, so he obviously hasn't been able to, or the coaches haven't been able to specifically work with the players, but that's what he's looking for. And he thinks that these guys can make a jump. And he also just gave the O-line all the credit in the world, saying basically everything starts there. And after making the comment about making a massive improvement, if we have talked about how Matt and I have talked about multiple times how good this offensive line could be, but if they make that massive improvement that DeBoard is hoping for, wow, I think that this O-line could be something pretty at least conference special this year.
Yeah, that's music to my ears. I like the way that sounds, but I then question it because it's coming out of Mike DeBoard's mouth. So
yeah,
mixed emotions from this side of the mic.
But for now, at least before things start, maybe let's take that at first year. I didn't look too much into this. Actually, you and I should do this and talk about it on an episode. We should look at his first year in Tennessee versus his second year, and then maybe compare some of the stuff. Maybe I'll feel a lot better, actually. We should do some research. Maybe his first year at Tennessee was pretty bad, or maybe a little rocky compared to stuff. So let's at least hope that he talked about his first to second year with the offense massively improving. So let's hope that we are on the right track with that as well.
I hope so, because I would love to see some offense this year.
Yeah, and then there another great thing that I love this part that he talked about. So, and that could also hopefully explain a lot of maybe just some of the stuff that went on last year. He was asked about the two offensive teams that they ran last year. So obviously he first talked about how they had like the one scheme for Lego and then the other scheme for Ramsey. And this year there's basically he was talking about how they're all more or less the same type of quarterback, where all three of them can they can move with their legs, they can throw a bit. So they're basically going to be under one system, and he emphasized in a couple sentences how that's really going to help everyone. And I just love to hear that everyone's going to be under the same system. He talked about that specifically, and how all the quarterbacks are basically starting to progress like that.
Yeah, and I think I might be jumping a little bit here to the quarterback conversation, or like later in the quarterback conversation, but I think we might see some of Mike Penix this year, and he's the freshman 4-star recruit. I'm going to quote this from Mind Your Banners, which is an Indie Star podcast with Zach Osterman and Chronic Hoosier. If you haven't heard them, check them out. Shout out to them.
Great
but anyways, Zach Osterman was talking about how the coaches were so high on Mike Penix and how he's a freshman, but he's still in the conversation to maybe get some starting minutes. And with the new redshirt rule, as we had previously alluded to on this podcast multiple times, I think we could definitely see him earlier in the year. And if he does well, I think we could see him eventually start.
Yeah, he actually did get a comment about, or maybe it was Tom Allen, just about freshmen in general getting red shirts and like wasting it. But I love that new 4-game rule. So maybe we can see Penix in like one game. Maybe he does really bad and they start to dial it back and they try and use that red shirt. But the last thing that DeBoard was asked about was actually the tight end group. They were asking him about the tight ends and who was kind of a front runner with everything. And he said just plain and simple that the entire tight end group is wide open, which we've kind of talked about before, but literally they don't even have there's 6 of them. They don't even have any of them ranked 1 through 6. So they're not sure at all. They're going to get through some of these training camp days, which they've had, I think 5 or so now, and just start to see who it is. We've talked about who we think is going to start to get a lot of the snaps, but we were just speculating. This tight end group is really wide open, and they're looking for a lot from this. They have high hopes on this group, though. They have a lot of potential, is what he was alluding to in that.
I mean, hey, competition's great, and then also with so many tight ends in the conversation, there has to be some people who are really good at certain situations, which is great. Just plug and play. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah. So basically, tight end by committee to try and replace Ian, but he was kind of talking like we won't even like some of these guys will be able to step up to the plate. But we'll see. Let's get into the quarterback talk, because, of course, we've got 3 quarterbacks that could potentially start, and even in just a Division I program, usually that doesn't happen, where you've got 3 players that could have very, very much potential to start. And I'm basically both Tom Allen and DeBoard at some point said that they're giving throughout all of training camp, they're going to give them equal reps. So each QB basically has to earn their spot. They said even if that means like extending stuff and adding more reps than they usually would have, they really emphasized making sure every single each Ramsey, Dawkins, and Penix Jr., which obviously a lot of us think that Penix Jr. might be lower on the totem pole, but they still are emphasizing that literally every single one of them is going to get the exact same amount of reps, not one more than the other. And Tom Allen continued on that thought to talk about how he still wants Dawkins to earn his spot. Obviously, he probably came over from Arizona thinking that the spot's more or less made for him, which in reality, it probably is, but they emphasized a lot that it's not going to be given to him. He's really going to have to earn it, and he also emphasized a lot that he's going to also earn not just the trust of the coaches, but the trust of the team, which I think that's where they're trying to make sure that they wait and see, just to see where training camp. And all three of them had a press conference together, which I don't think that's going to be a problem. But the day before training camp I liked how they were talking about how every single QB was going to have a shot. And in terms of making a decision basically for day one, because our first football game, IU plays FIU on September 1st, so the very first day of the month, he said there's really no time limit on naming the starter, but they don't want to be really at the last day. So it seems like at the latest, maybe half a week beforehand, but I think they're going to try and make a decision a little earlier.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing from that is Peyton Ramsey really won over the locker room last year when he got the starting job. And I think it's going to be hard to take that away from him in the eyes of the locker room, especially with a guy coming from Arizona who is good, but, they still have their guy, right? So they got to see in practice that actually Brandon is better than Peyton and that he actually earns a spot. And then if he does that, then I think he wins over the locker room. And I think there's a lot better chemistry within the program instead of I feel like this transfer, what is he doing? He's coming over from Arizona and taking away the guy who earned his spot last year and wasn't even supposed to be playing and then started playing and was playing great. So.
Yeah. And that comment fuses with two stuff. The one that I talked about with Tom Allen, that basically that's exactly what he was saying, that he's going to have to not win over on the field, but win over the team off the field. And then it moves into the next comment I had where they all had a press conference together because, of course, you got a 3-quarterback race, so why not have all three of them at the mic at the same time? But with just the plethora of questions that they answered, Ramsey was answering them the best. Believe it or not, when you look at those three quarterbacks, Ramsey is the veteran on the team in the QB room because he's already been there a year. But he really was confident, and I really liked the way he answered his questions. He answered them like a senior with just his tone, his demeanor, and the confidence that he was saying. He wasn't stuttering. It seemed like he had already been in front of the microphone for a while, and not taking away, because Dawkins also did pretty well. Penix was a freshman with answering some of the questions. But I just liked how he was just taking apart just even that press conference and trying to even just be a leader when there's even no need to be in front of some of those media guys. But I like the way he answered a lot of those questions.
Well, I like the confidence, but I also want to see some improvement from him because we could definitely use some improvement at the quarterback situation over last year's debacle. So,
yep. Yeah. But in terms of answering questions, I guess that's about as much as you can get from just players talking before practice has even started. And generally some of the questions were, more of them were kind of not pointless, but not necessarily 100% pertinent. But there was someone that asked, was just trying to get more of an answer just from Dawkins about why he left Arizona, why IU and stuff. He just kind of talked about how there were off the field things, which he didn't talk about. He kind of danced around, obviously, that they had found another QB that they were basically going to keep going with at Arizona, like we've mentioned before, like everyone knows. But he also talked about some of the off the field things like coaching changes and like how he also wanted to learn more systems and stuff like that. Then getting to IU, he just liked the IU's the family feel of the program. He liked really the atmosphere. And once he visited, he basically was like, I didn't need to visit anywhere else. I kind of knew where I wanted to go. I liked everyone here. I liked the coaches. I liked the attitude everyone was giving. And he just was really honest. And I really liked, I think he's really embracing coming to IU, which a guy coming from such a great quarterback or a great football team and stuff, usually you wouldn't think of them, and being a good quarterback too, you wouldn't really think of them coming to IU to really embrace it. But I like how he's embraced it. He's embracing his opportunity, at least hopefully.
Arizona is a decent football school. They're more of a basketball school than they are a football school. But as of recently, they have Rich Rodriguez. So
yeah, and I mean, they are a school that at least have been one of the few, at least, that have been ranked consistently in football and basketball every year. But they're, I mean, at least they're better than IU for football.
That's, well,
yeah,
that ain't hard.
All right, that's about it for the IU football media. Nothing crazy exciting. It's kind of the same stuff for like NFL training camps. Everyone talks about stuff right before training camp. Training camp happens. Practices go on. Even you don't even glean a lot from even training camp stuff, just because a lot of the stuff's already set in stone, and we've already talked about a lot of the team being set in stone. But let's talk about the sophomore class. Just a few of the people that we can that are going to be playing basically, and who we were just talking about. We'll start with Peyton Ramsey, who obviously there's competition for this spot, but what are you seeing? And this is 100% speculation, because especially the quarterback spot, it could change completely 180. What do you think Peyton Ramsey's situation could potentially be this year?
I think he ends up as backup. I think he might start the first week just because he's more familiar with the system. But as the season goes on, I think Brandon Dawkins becomes the starting quarterback, just because I think he earns it. But that's my really positive scenario. I think more realistically, he ends up being the starter, and then in case of injury, Dawkins is a more than capable backup.
Interesting. Yeah, I think also we're not going to be able to know much, because even the head coaches and the offensive coordinators and everyone has said that they don't even nobody knows anything yet.
Nope.
Yeah. So really, there's not. We've also talked about Peyton a lot, and we'll probably will almost even preview, like when we preview FIU or just preview the entire year in itself. We'll probably talk about the quarterback situation, just because we've talked about it that much. We don't need to go into it too much. Everyone's heard it. There's not much more information we can give. If we were to give information, we'd just be predicting things. We'll be like, oh, I think Peyton Ramsey's going to start game 1, but not game 2. Just random stuff that all of us can do. But let's move on to the running back situation, which, when you think about it, there are not very many upperclassmen running backs. You got Mike Majette, but really then it goes down to, and he could potentially not even be the starter. Really, the guy that's looking out to be the starter, and then the backup is Morgan Ellison, then Cole Guest. So really, we've got a strong, or at least for IU's running back room, the sophomore class is the running back room at IU. So you got Morgan Ellison, who, if healthy, because we had health troubles with every single running back this year, there's a good chance he could come out as the #1 running back, at least at the beginning of the year, because there are so many of them. I think it'll change, but it's going to be a committee thing, especially between Ellison and Guest.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really liked what I saw from Ellison last year when he was in, and when he wasn't running into his own players off the line. But I think Guest was really, he was a good addition to the offense. I think he came in halfway through the year. They weren't really playing him until probably about the 6th or 7th game.
Because of injuries too.
Yeah, he was a bit of a spark plug. So I like what I see from him too. It's if I told you who I think is going to be the starting running back, I could be completely wrong, because again, it's one of those things where it's just it's up in the air, which means the season could be really fantastic on offense because everybody earns their spot, or disastrous because nobody earns their spot. And then we're just what do we do? So
yeah, it's I feel like the offense is either it's 100% set in stone, or it's 100% not set in stone. QBs and running backs, 100% not set in stone. Wide receivers, offensive linemen, 100% set in stone. And yeah, unless you get into the kickers and the punters, which the kicker's not, but the punter is. The kicker's 100% not, punter 100% is. But
what about the long snappers? Don't forget about the long snappers.
Oh my goodness! All right, let's get into the wide receivers before we go talking about long snappers on our episode. We got a couple receivers that will probably see playing time. I wanted to mention them. because they probably will see the field. So if you see their names and you're confused at who they are, but they're pretty. Our receiver depth is starting to look a lot better, at least if we don't have injuries. The first person that we've all started to see at the end of the season last year was Whop Fillier. He was basically a surprise receiver that we all didn't think would really come. Also, he shouldn't have been playing because the amount of injuries that we had, we didn't obviously want to have that many injuries, so he's kind of forced to play. And last year he was a freshman, like he was outright. He didn't redshirt, so you could already see that he was starting to do something there without already taking that redshirt year. He had honorable mention Big10.com, Big Ten All Freshman. He was also the Big Ten Freshman of the Week against Maryland. I think he really, I would assume you agree, just adds a lot of quality depth. He's not going to see a crazy amount of minutes. He's going to get into a couple sub packages where they might just have a bunch of receivers out there. But if it weren't for a lot of great receivers, he'd probably be getting a lot of time. If he does get a lot of time, he might be because of injuries.
I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he gets a lot more minutes than you're actually saying, because I think he becomes our third on the depth chart. I think it goes Westbrook, Hale, him on the depth chart. I'm on the Whop Fillier trade. Like,
there we go.
Choo-choo. I am the captain. I'm the captain and the caboose of the damn train. Okay, I'm all aboard.
All right, we know where Matt's is going with Whop. I was trying to be a little more realistic, but I would not be surprised at all because he was a guy that, if you look at his stats are not going to be indicative of the kind of plays that he was making and the kind of potential that he could have. But then we'll go to the other receiver that might not have heard before because he literally got one catch last year, but his name is Ty Freifogel. And yeah, he's
a fun name to say. I can't wait to hear the announcers at at Memorial Stadium go Freifogel.
But he's starting to make his way up the wide receiver depth chart. He's had some promising offseason. He's had some buzz talking around about him, and don't be surprised. He's not going to get a lot of playing time at the beginning, I don't think, unless something changes. But don't be surprised if you see or hear the word Freifogel just out there. And yeah, he could be out there a few times.
I agree. Well put.
Same kind of thing. He also didn't redshirt, so he's a guy that the coaches think could contribute right away. Which I guess if that rule was in effect 1 year earlier, he would have redshirted because he only played 2 games and got 1 reception. So I don't know, something like that. But anyway, let's go into the biggest producer of the offense as a sophomore, Mackenzie Norwa, which is the last piece of the puzzle of this offensive line that we have been raving about in multiple previous episodes. He's going to be that right guard slot that he started, was it 6 or so games last year, but played in 10. He kind of started to improve as his role. He's starting to get more seasoned as he got a lot of playing time last year. He's going to be the sure starter. There's no competition for the starting jobs for the offensive linemen. And this is going to be a guy that's going to be able to get a lot of playing time and just could be the anchor of this offensive line and going forward for multiple years to come.
I mean, I think, yeah, like you said, I think he's going to be the offensive lineman of the future. I think with every iteration of the IU offensive line, you can tell who the nice, really good upcoming linemen are. So they always get in their freshman year and they like play half the games. And then sophomore year, they kind of have like a breakout season. Their junior year, they end up being all Big Ten, and then they go to the NFL. And I think he's on the same track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. It's too early to tell. I was about to say like maybe not early draft picks or something like that, but who knows? But he's a guy that's going to be solid. Knock on wood, he hasn't had too many injury problems. But then the other guy that I just threw in there for a second, Harry Kreider, going to be a left guard guy. You're going to hear his name just because he's second on the depth chart for left guard, or maybe a couple other positions. Really, it's only going to be if he comes in for injuries. But let's go into the last kind of offensive, in quotes, position. Jared Smoller, the kicker. We talked about the kicking position when we were replacing, talking about how we were going to replace Griffin Oaks. But this was that Rutgers transfer that we talked about before, who's had some playing time. He redshirted last year coming in. He's going to compete for the starting job with a couple of people and has a pretty good chance at being the starter at the beginning of the year, obviously pending how training camp goes.
Yeah. I mean, competition is competition. So competition's good.
Mm-hmm. So just watch out for that name and watch out for multiple kickers' names. So you could just see his name out, which I think at least, because we also talked about how Tom Allen wants to go to possibly 2 kickers, one for kicking field goals and extra points and one for the kickoffs. He's a guy that was that kickoff kicker at Rutgers. So don't be surprised if he's the guy doing kickoffs and potentially more. But let's go to the defense. Defense is pretty quick, actually. 4 out of the 5 are really going to be backups. So the 2 backups, Michael Ziemba and Jerome Johnson, are going to be 2 defensive linemen that are going to be backups, because the starters are more or less in place, even with our rocky defensive linemen. But just given the amount of snaps the D-line has to play, and D-line is really a position that a lot of people play, they're going to be guys that are going to get playing time. From what we talked about before, they're guys that aren't awful, but they're guys that aren't going to knock some heads, but when they come in there, they shouldn't be too much of a fallback.
Yeah, I mean, any time for them as sophomores to play, especially when they're not starting, is good. And they play in a position that they will get a lot of playing time and be able to get some experience and hopefully learn from that and improve to be starters their junior year.
That's what that's what the other point I was going to make. Just like Norwa, these guys are basically going to hopefully be learning over to take over the D-line in the next couple of years.
Yep.
The other 2 backups that won't see as much playing time as those D linemen, but LaDamian Hunt and Raheem Lane are going to be the cornerback backups. They're kind of slotted in right there at the beginning of the backup situation if anyone were to get injured or step out. Not going to see too much playing time unless injuries. You might see him for a few snaps, but that's about it. But last but not least, and possibly going to be the best player literally on the entire defensive team, is Marcelino Ball at the Husky position. So if you don't remember anything about him, he started outright as a freshman, so no red shirt. He played 3 games last year before suffering a season-ending injury, which was just one of the season-ending injuries that we had last year. And he was able to get that medical red shirt. But if you don't remember a couple years ago, his freshman year, here's some of the accolades that he received. He was the 24/7 Sports True Freshman All-American. He was honorable mention All Big Ten from the Coaches and Media, ESPN.com and BTN.com Big Ten All-Freshman. He was the Big Ten Freshman of the Week against Ball State and IU's Defensive Newcomer of the Year. In addition, he also finished 3rd on the team with 75 tackles. I'll repeat that. As a freshman, he was 3rd on the team for tackles. He had 60 solo stops, 2 interceptions, which was tied for 3rd, 8 pass breakups. He started 12 games out of the 13, and as a freshman, and he played in all 13 as at the Husky position and led the entire Big Ten freshman in tackles. And that was just his freshman year.
Yeah, he's a monster. He's a beast. He's going to kill it this year. I already know it. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever you do to be lucky. No injuries this year.
Yep.
Let's have a healthy defense. And this defense should be pretty good. I think he's going to be the star of the defense this year.
Yeah, because remember, it was 2 years ago that Tom Allen came into IU and was the reason why we went from like 100th to like 40th in our defensive rankings. And Ball was one of the reasons about that. And then last year, obviously, we had a lot of injuries. Hopefully, like Matt just talked about, that was the one thing, the only thing that would prevent Ball from anything is just normal injuries, which we hope and pray that he's not going to get injured, as of most people. But that's the football side of it. And then the basketball side, just a couple people. First, we'll have Ethan Lasco. There's not much
play much.
No, he didn't even get very many garbage time minutes when it came in. It was really, even from the walk-ons, he's kind of far down.
He won't get any this year either, sadly.
Mm-mm.
I think his
Nope.
junior year, we're looking next year, he'll get some garbage time minutes once
Yeah.
the rest of the walk-ons leave.
Yeah. But next to the guy that we could potentially talk about the most, Clifton Moore, just because he's the biggest question mark probably out of the entire team.
Yeah, he is going from a future this year's first round draft pick as he was projected last year coming in, and we were like, oh my goodness, have we pulled off a recruiting coup? Like, what is this? What did we do?
And then he played
And
like a handful of minutes.
then he played garbage time minutes with the walk-ons. So then we're like, what do we expect from him? And honestly, I don't even know. And I really have tried to figure it out if he's going to play this year, and I have absolutely no idea. And I think Evan Fitzner might have a really big role in teaching Clifton what he can become, because I see a lot of what Evan is in Clifton. 6'10", power forward, can shoot the three, spread the floor, and use his length to defend. And I think it's exactly what Clifton is in Archie's system and what Archie wants him to be. So, Evan, if you're listening to this, I know you're probably not, but if you for some reason were to stumble upon this, please take Clifton under your wing and teach him the ways of being a tall, very good shooting person. Please.
This is like what we talked about with trying to predict quarterbacks. A little easier, but trying to predict like the running back or the tight end starters, it's kind of hard to predict even just what Clifton will be on this team going forward. And not that I don't think it's necessarily this way, but even if it was basically Evan versus Clifton kind of really playing for those specific minutes. I don't think it's that way, but even if it was, at least so far from what we've seen, Evan's been having a heck of a summer camp, and we've just heard nothing but good things from him, that he's coming in and doing really well. But
I mean, coming from summer camp, I hope we would only hear good things from him. If we heard bad things, it would be a really bad sign.
Yeah. But
yeah, no, and to finish my point, which is that there's a bunch of question marks on this roster, I think that's the reason why I've seen some fans online that are upset about our preseason rankings. Like, we should be higher than 25th or 24th or whatever. But you have to understand that while we all understand as IU fans the potential that these guys have and the talent that they possess, because we sit here and it's our one team and we focus on them as much, these guys that are out like ESPN and the coaches polls, they're all focused like on the broad spectrum of things in the college basketball world. So it's really hard to go, you know what, I remember that guy Clifton Moore, and he played 3 minutes last year. I totally remember that guy, who could end up being a critical piece in this year's team if he maxes out on his potential this year, which I don't think he will, but he could be. So there's a bunch of question marks. You got Clifton, you got Race, you got, Demezy and Finney. Like, we don't know what we're going to get out of these guys. And so you can't say, well, why aren't we like a top 15 team? Well, because we don't know what we're going to get out of these guys until, we play Chicago State in the first game. By the way, that was announced today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk about this more later, but your preseason comment, it's also, you got to remember, the last thing everyone remembers is that we didn't even make the NIT. So that's still kind of, that's you still got to take that into perspective when you're talking about rankings. But the last two people we got, Al Durham. So I think most of us would probably agree, at least in all likelihood, he probably won't ever, at least we haven't really talked about him ever being really the starting point guard this season. He's obviously going to play a huge role on this team, a lot of backups, but maybe he could kick it up a lot. Haven't heard much about him in regards to making drastic improvements. I'll emphasize the drastic parts over the offseason and the spring. We've even heard stuff about Devontae from Archie and him and Devontae himself, but I haven't heard drastic things from Al. He's a great backup. at least as of now. I think he just needs to take more chances. I know the assembly call made this point, and I want to steal their point. They like when we were remembering his streak last year when he wasn't committing a turnover, that was great. I'm not taking away any of that from him at all, but I mean, part of it was because he wasn't taking very many chances. He was being a little more reserved with the ball. In order to at least become a starting point guard and be the guy leading the team, he's got to take more chances. He's got to be more of an on-the-court leader, and at least in that respect, he has to get better.
Yeah, I agree. But I think his role on this team, and I can see where kind of Archie might do with him with it, which is he's a defensive guy. Like Al's defense is great, so he'll be a utility guy. So depending on who we're playing, he might come in and get some lineups where he's the third guard on the floor. So we have, Finney or Devontae playing point guard, Romeo obviously on the court, and then we got Al on the court as well as that third defensive guard, coming up against teams like Michigan who like to play with three guards. So, or we could see him come in and be the backup point guard when we're playing against a team like, I don't know, I can't think of anybody but St. John's right now, and we're not going to play St. John's. But if we were to play St. John's in the tournament, and they have Shamori Pons, who's a great point guard in his own right, and is going to be one of the Big Ten players of the year. So if we somehow ended up playing them in the tournament, Al could come in and be that defensive stopper on the point guard position. So there you go.
Yeah, I agree. Great points. I think he's also another question mark just because we haven't heard a lot of specific improvements, specific declines or anything with him. It's also, we got to see where Finney stands with all of this, because maybe Finney is just not what we hope it to be, and then Al's going to have to step up more, or Finney could be more than what we hoped him to be, and Al would take more of a backseat to everything. I think a lot of what his playing time and his role is also going to be deterrent from just what other players are also doing. Because also, same thing with Devontae. Maybe Devontae isn't as good as we're all still hoping his breakout could be, or he could come out to be one of the better point guards in the league, because that's what we've been hoping for. At least he has potential to have that kind of breakout of a thing, but we just don't know. I think every guard, point guard, let's exclude Romeo, I think every guard could really have be a breakout year, or kind of just be meh on the side and hasn't really improved much.
Yeah. Again, I think Al's more of a question mark than he is an answer.
I agree. Yeah. So I guess we're going to have to see, especially more, like I've said, not many off-season stuff, but practice hasn't started yet. We'll wait to see when practice and all that stuff starts. And last but not least, potentially probably one of the most exciting guys that could be, that will be on the team, Justin Smith.
I hope he'll be on the team.
Justin Smith. I got my sentences mixed up. He could, and we hope to see basically like a team-changing improvement, almost as drastic as Juwan from his sophomore to junior year. That's, I think, a lot of his ceiling, and that's what I think a lot of IU fans are going to hope for, is that he has that kind of Juwan jump, to where he's the guy that's almost being like Juwan, basically, where he's going to demand more of the ball. He's going to be more of a presence on more of the perimeter and down low. He's going to be more of a physical guy. He's going to shoot a little more. Everyone's, I think, hoping for a big thing. I think we're going to have to temper expectations just a little bit. Not a lot, because I think he's going to improve drastically, but maybe just a little bit, because also we've still got Juwan. We've got Romeo now. We've got maybe even someone like Evan taking a lot of these shots. So we also have to see, just as a team perspective, we have to potentially, at least stats-wise, maybe look at Justin and not expect 10 to 15 points a game from him or something like that.
Well, that, and we also have to understand that he's going to be splitting minutes with McRoberts.
Yep.
And then also probably with Juwan. So he's also going to back up Juwan. But then he'll also, when Juwan's on the court, be playing the three. And then if he's playing the three, that means he's splitting minutes with McRoberts. And we all know how much Archie loves McRoberts. So then, of course, McRoberts isn't going to not play. And then who knows if the freshmen come up. So, again, how much he plays, he might actually this year play less minutes than he did last year. And I don't think that's like a knock on Justin Smith at all. But I think that's just because their rotation is a lot deeper this year, especially if you got so many players. Because you can go down the list and go from Romeo and Jawan, who are going to play, to Clifton Moore down at the bottom, like the biggest question marks, and go, I could totally see all these guys playing, right? I could see Race playing minutes. I can see Clifton playing minutes. And then so you go, where are the minutes going to go? How are all these guys going to play and be happy? Because they all have to probably play a little bit to at least be like, all right, I chose the right program. So I could definitely see Justin Smith's minutes slightly going down, and it's not his fault. And he probably gets better. And to make an improvement, I think he has to be, because he had decent numbers last year, but being more efficient and getting around the same numbers this year is how I would see a drastic increase in his stock.
Yeah, I think I don't want a lot of these to be cop-outs just because, he could do this, but he could also do this. I think Justin's ceiling is kind of a Juwan Morgan-esque improvement to where he's basically, we have like a big three kind of with Romeo, Justin, and Juwan on the core. I could see that being his top potential this year, to where they've got three options.
I like where your head's at.
Yeah.
that would be really good.
But I think also, like Matt said, I think his floor is also, not sure if I necessarily agree with his minutes dwindling, but I like where your head's at. I know what you're talking about, where his minutes are more or less the same, maybe even a little less, maybe only like a minute or two more, where everyone's
it's not gonna be like a drastic increase. Like, he's not gonna be playing 35 minutes a game. Like, I just don't think that's gonna be it. What did he play, like 15, 16 minutes last year?
I remember, probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I assume that he'll probably be around that mark again. And I said, don't be surprised if his minutes decrease. And that's not because, and like, what I mean decrease, I mean like, if he played 15 minutes last year, let's say he plays 14 minutes this year. So it's like he's going to play around the same amount. But for him to improve, more efficient, get better around the rim, and at least attempt and / get more confident with your three ball. Because if he can do all three of those things, he can space the floor. If he can, take contact and actually finish through contact, because last year he had a problem doing that. He drew fouls, and that's fine. But then he went to the free throw line, and probably also has to. Of course, the whole team actually has to probably increase their free throw percentage this year to not give me a heart attack every time they go to the line. But there's areas that he can improve in, and then he's also improving areas that he's already pretty decent at. If you've ever seen, the highlight of him breaking the max vertical at IU. So we all knew he had hops, but now we know he's a bunny rabbit dressed up as a human being.
Which also, not to take away from a lot of his things, but really, I want to clarify a little more that when we were all like, which nothing to take away, he just destroyed the IU record. But when we were talking about it close to like NBA Combine stuff, the NBA Combine, how last year we were talking about, the highest was 42 inches of a vertical, and he got 48. Like, how much of a difference that was. The Combine, they're only allowed 2 steps before a jump, and they were taking 4 or 5 steps. So I think he's going to be higher than 42, but it's not going to be like when he goes to the NBA Combine. Hopefully, eventually, he's not going to be jumping 48 just because he's got lower of a step. Right. But like I said, I think his ceiling is an improvement as much as Juwan did from 2 years ago to this past year. I think his floor is kind of what we saw from Devontae 2 years ago to last year, because last offseason everyone was kind of really high on Devontae, hoping that he has this breakout year. He's going to be the next, not necessarily Yogi, but he's going to be the next sure point guard. You know what I mean? Like the face of the point guard, just the guy that's going to be the go-to point guard, and there's no question marks with the point guard position. I could see his floor being that, to where we're all hoping and expecting, everyone's expecting it, for him to have this drastic improvement, where he just doesn't, and he kind of does more or less the same thing. And at least in his defense, what Matt talked about, a lot of those factors could be just that the rotations are different. But again, it's also maybe these freshmen are really coming up, so maybe Justin won't have as much. And I think a lot of these are, again, bigger question marks. Even someone as sure as Justin, who could start at the beginning of the year. I think there's just a lot of question marks. But let's get into our last thing. We've got a Twitter question that came through because we don't want to make this episode crazy long. But Respectable Adam, a guy that's very active on all of the Hoosier podcasts, whether it be basketball, football, all of that stuff. He listens, comments, asks a lot of questions. So he's a great guy. Been involved with even our smaller show as well. But he asked which IU football sophomore will be a difference maker this year per our sophomore class episode. Matt, do you want to give it up before I give my answer?
Sure. I'll go, and actually I'll give you two answers. I'll give you one for the offense and one for the defense. So I think my first one for the defense is TD Roof. He's a linebacker. And he was a transfer from Georgia Tech. I think in a linebacking core where there's a lot of question marks, I think he could probably come through and definitely answer some of the questions that we need and some of the needs that need to be met in that core. We need somebody who can get tackles. We need somebody who's reliable. We need somebody that doesn't get injured. And I think he can be that guy. First up.
As a difference maker? Like
as a difference maker. Yeah, as a team difference maker. I mean, Marcelino Ball, sure, like he's a difference maker and he's going to be the star, but we already knew this. So I'm talking about if TD Roof comes through and is a reliable linebacker, I think he makes our team a lot better than Marcelino Ball. It's already going to be there, and we already know what he's going to bring to the table. So that's my first answer, because the defense drastically improves with a better linebacking core. And then second answer, so for offense, is I think Whop Fillier. Again, I'm on the Whop train. I think he has a breakout year. I think he's like one of the best underclassmen in the Big Ten. I think he has a fantastic year with the receiving core. I think he works out really well with the offensive scheme that we have going with DeBoard.
Yeah,
so there's my answers.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a couple answers too. I was gonna say the easy answer. It's pretty obvious. The easy answer is Marcelino Ball, just because he's one of the best players on the entire defense, or he was one of the best players on the entire defense his freshman year without redshirting. And if injury doesn't hold him back, he's going to be possibly the best player on the entire defense this year, next to Jonathan Crawford, possibly the best player on the entire team. So that's the easy answer. As a difference maker, because even stat wise, he's probably going to be a pretty big difference maker, hopefully, but not the easy answer. I have two running back. I have two offensive options as well. I put Morgan Ellison or Mackenzie Norwa, just because Ellison has the potential to, because he started to, the running back is all committee. There's not one sure person, but Morgan Ellison, he's starting to break off just a little bit from at least some of the other ones. So he has the potential to set himself apart from everyone else in the running back room. And since if you're going to be the top running back, you're going to be a difference maker. And especially if we've got this offensive line that's running really well. And also he's not just of sophomores, he's going to be the running back out of everyone. And then also Mackenzie Norwood, just because he's not going to get all of the stats or all of the big plays that you could see with Ball or Ellison on paper. But like we just talked about, the O-line has the potential to be really, really good this year. And they could be an underrated section of the offense, and they're probably going to get less credit than they deserve if this offense starts to click. And he's going to be one of those main people, especially with the running game, just because he's at that guard position. He's going to have to move some people out of the way to help Ellison. But yeah, if that offensive line, if they both start to click in the running and the passing game, a lot of it's going to be to Mackenzie Norwood, just because offensive line's obviously a team effort, and they all have got to be really solid. And at least this year, all five of them are so far, at least hopefully, really solid as a team unit.
Yes, I agree. And I also want to clarify my TD. I want to clarify my defensive pick. Okay, I was gonna pick Ball, but he was so obvious that I was like, I'm gonna go off the beaten path a little bit. So, Respectable Adam, I'm not dumb. Okay, I understand who it is. I understand Marcelino Ball's amazing. So don't hate.
That's why prefaced mine by saying I have the easy answer, which is right there, but then I also gave my other two that are not the easy answer, just because. Yeah, it's basically right. It's basically like saying who's going to be the difference maker on the Patriots. It's going to be like, well, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be Tom Brady.
If you came to this podcast wanting answers to questions, you just got a bunch more questions from us, and that's just what happened this podcast. So I hope you enjoy it, guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up for our 48th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Stay tuned through updates on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound, Facebook, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so you can get all those notifications for when we go live, when we have an episode, so you won't miss stuff. And visit our website, thehoosiersound.com, because we really do have all of the information in one place. You want to find maybe a new method of listening to us, maybe something like Spotify came up. It's all there on one place. As always, send us your questions as the audience, because as we just talked about for the past 5 or 10 minutes, just be sure to comment, chat, send us a message. You can also email us at contact@thehoosiersound.com on what questions you have, and we'll get them on our next episode. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links, because it really, really does help grow our podcast. That's really the way that our podcast grows, just word of mouth. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.